Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. Welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. Look, if you are in business and the term intellectual property comes up, you've probably thought that is something that unless I am an engineer, a lawyer, attorney, I've got an MBA or I'm an entrepreneur, unless I've got all of those tools in my toolkit, I'm not going to be able to do this properly. And you're probably right in terms of thinking, because there's a lot of skills you need to understand. But there are some risks that if you don't get this right in your business, the consequences could be dire. So we're looking at a couple of different aspects here today in our conversation. One, firstly, understanding what intellectual property is, why you need to protect it, why you need to be careful about infringing on somebody else's intellectual property, and how you can use that as part of your growth strategy. Now, I mentioned having many tools in your toolkit to understand what you need to do properly. The great thing for you is we have the man here on the microphone that is all of those things, has all of those skills in his toolkit. And the best part about it is he's going to share with you today how to make intellectual property part of your strategy. So, Jeff Holman, welcome to the Business Behind Your Business podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Paul. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you here because it's not every day we get to have a conversation with somebody who has all of those skills, engineering, attorney, law, MBA, entrepreneurial, all bringing it together. So we're excited that you're here today to share with us some of the tools about how we can make intellectual property part of our growth strategy. Now, just how are you qualified to talk to us on this topic? Well, you're the founder of Intellectual Strategies, which is a law firm working with startups and helping businesses scale, accessing legal support. Your background is in engineering, law, business, so you can act as a translator, talking between those different industries because they have different ways of talking to each other,
for sure.
Understanding them. So you're a practicing attorney in California, Utah, and you've got a lot of experience with the US Patent and Trademark Office. Sounds like you've got a lot of experience helping business owners understand what they need to do with intellectual property. And you've got a new approach to this, which is really, I think, helpful for business owners, this fractional legal team model. And we're going to sort of dive into a bit about how that actually helps. But let's just start with the basics. How should a business owner start thinking about intellectual property as part of their growth strategy?
Oh, I love that we're diving straight into this. I would say, just for a little bit of background, I would say that question is why I ended up where I'm at today, because I was helping IBM and Intel build patent portfolios, essentially. Put one more patent in there. IBM at the time was getting like 8,000 patents every year, right? It's just astounding. And I was helping put those patents in their portfolio. And at one point I'm like, wait a second, what am I really contributing here? I love working with startups and scaling companies, these smaller businesses where, they live and die off of the ideas that they're bringing into reality. And how do I make sure that the IP, the intellectual property, which we can dig into that more, how do I make sure that's aligned with the business so it really is an asset to them and not just one more patent in the armory like the really big companies were doing. So intellectual property is really it's the ability to protect the innovative things that you create. The stuff that comes out of your mind and becomes reality. That might be inventions, which are protected by patents. It might be brands, which are usually protected by trademarks. It might be other creative works that we protect with copyrights. And it might also be just trade secrets, the things in your business that you keep secret, but they bring you some type of economic value because you own them, right? You keep them secret and don't share them with the world. That might be customer lists. We hear about the, recipes that these large companies, restaurants, beverage companies have, like Coca-Cola or a KFC, chicken spice recipe. trade secrets protect the things that bring you value because you keep them secret and nobody else has them. So intellectual property is really, it's the government tools that businesses of any size can use to protect the things that they innovate around.
And I love the way you say businesses of any size, because I've dealt with a lot of business owners who've come up with the idea and thought, I don't have the skills or the finances to actually, get a patent on my invention or provide any protection. So I'm just not going to do anything with it. Dealing with small, medium business owners, is that really the case, or are we misinformed there?
I would say there's some truth to that, to be really candid. It's not true in every circumstance, but if you look at starting the process, let's just take, for example, I work with innovators all the time, and they either have an idea for a business or an idea for an invention, a product, and they say, well, where do I start? Right. And if we talk about where we start, there are steps you can take to get into the process of developing a product or into the process of developing a company that are doable. To be realistic about it, though, you need to be achieving milestones along the way, because in the end of it, 2 or 3 years down the road, getting that patent, getting that company off the ground, however long it takes you, that does require a lot of effort. It usually requires funding. It requires a lot of time, a lot of energy. And so, I think back to one of my clients that I have. They came to me maybe 2 years ago, and they wanted to create a new invention around filtering water in a certain setting, right? And we helped them file their patent, and eventually I said to them, how'd you get involved in this? Why did you start this? And they said, Jeff, we went to the store because we had this problem outside our house, and we were trying to figure out, what we could do, what we could buy to solve this problem with our water, and we couldn't find it. So now here we are a year later, and I think by that time they'd probably put $80,000 into the process of getting a patent, getting prototypes made, and things like that, because they couldn't buy the thing at the store for $20, right? So now I say that because the $80,000, that's not an unrealistic number if you're really truly going to bring a product to market. That doesn't mean that on day one they had to write a check for $80,000, right? That they had to get started, and what people need to understand is that when you get started, there are a lot of ways to validate what you're doing along the way. So you're not making a huge commitment on day one, you're making smaller commitments. And if those smaller commitments don't work out, then you pull the plug, you go a different direction, you stop spending money. If they do work out, then you get to decide, do you want to keep going down the path? And if you do keep going down the path and keep validating and keep having success in the process, eventually you probably will find yourself very committed and, have spent a fair amount of money on the process. So there's truth to what you're saying, but it doesn't mean you start out on day one with that huge commitment.
Yeah. So it's a progressive process to go from start to finish. So a lot of people have the misunderstanding that you only start your patent process after you've developed the project and done all your testing. And that's why they don't wait.
Yeah.
They don't go ahead.
Yeah, that's probably not so true, simply because, when you're, we all have this, right? We're sitting at a stoplight, or we're sitting, a lot of things happen in the bathroom where people, that's sort of the shower where the ideas come up, right? And they're like, oh, that's a really good idea. What people should understand is that this idea of creating a product, bringing an idea into reality, it's totally speculative, right? We think we have a great idea because we came up with it, and we're like, well, that's an awesome idea. IP kind of tracks that speculative nature of the idea, right? You usually have to make an investment in your patent, especially, and sometimes your trademarks and things like that, before you know if it's actually going to be a good idea. And so it's super important to find ways to stage the commitment of resources, money, time, and stuff in a reasonable way. If you're a small company, if you're a solo inventor, just a startup, founder team, something like that, you really need to stage that to match the level of validation you've done on the idea. And so I think of, I talk with a lot of founders about how to validate. We don't do the validation because we're the attorneys, but what the founders need to be doing is three things. They need to be validating their technology, make sure the technology is going to work, right? And if along the way your idea turns into technology or something that you can't validate, well, that's going to tell you, okay, we need to stop putting time into this, right? So validate that the technology is actually something they can make. Validate that there's a market that is willing to pay for your product or whatever it is, your brand, your service. Validate that the market will pay for it at a price that works for you. And if you can't validate that, then also that means you probably need to rethink where you're headed with it. And then legal comes in the third step, which is really protect your freedom to operate that business, to sell that product, to sell your service, to provide your service to people. Protect your freedom to operate your business. That's where the legal, the financial, the operations come into play. And so it's this kind of really stepwise approach where you say, okay, I got an idea and I think it's great. Let's validate the technology a little bit, validate the market, make sure we can protect ourselves and make sure the financials work. Okay, great. Let's go to the next level. That's all working. Let's move forward and do more and more of that until one day you've probably put a ton of time and energy into this and you're running a business and you've got people who buy your product and your product works and you're on version 2 and version 3 of your product, but it all starts at the very beginning, and those first steps need to be small, and you need to really do all three of them together. Because if you just move forward with legal and you go get a patent on something, but you've never validated the technology, never taken any steps to validate that somebody will buy your product, you're out of balance, right? And that legal spend is going to be super high. And this is where inventors get frustrated that, I spent $20,000 getting a patent and now nobody will buy my product, or I can't find someone to make it, or whatever. Like you're out of balance. You want to try to stay in balance with those three factors: validating technology, validating market, and freedom to operate.
Yeah. Great advice there. Look, my experience is that too many people think that the legal registering of the patent is the whole process, and
no.
you've correctly shown us that that's not the process. The validation that it actually works, well, it's a bit of a sidestep here, but one of the things that I'm excited about right at the moment is I'm actually working with a lot of medium-sized companies, small, medium companies, helping them get research and development government assistance funding to help them continue this validation process. So depending on where you are and where you're listening to the podcast today, that may be an option to you to help you in that validation process. Is look at what government grants are available in your local area. And we won't dwell too much on that because that's a completely different topic.
No, but it's important, right? And I think it comes into play different ways, if I can, because I've worked with a lot of people who also get government funding to develop their products. And some of the government funding, and I don't know which ones you work with, or maybe you work across the spectrum, some of the government funding is really available for practical startups, right? People developing a product that they can simply make and sell today. Other people that we work with are like these very smart PhD researchers who are developing technology for 20 years into the future. Those types of government grants have a lot to do with technology validation, but you can't do any type of market validation because the market's not even there to buy the technology that might work 20 years into the future. So it's where you're getting your money and how you're sourcing that and who you are, what your type of product you're developing makes a huge difference as to which parts of the validation you can actually do.
I think the third string of that was actually getting validation that somebody will actually buy your product.
Yes.
Important. So I'm sure you've got some experience where people have gone down the track of developing, as you mentioned, they've got the $20,000 patent, but nobody's buying their product. It's never a pleasant conversation to have with them to tell them that, hey, you should have talked to me beforehand.
Yeah. And we have some clients, frankly, when they do talk to us, they'll come and they'll be like, hey, we've got in fact, I created this, I don't use it much because people don't always want it, but I've created this, what I call the success plan, right? People come and they say, I want to get a patent on my new product, my new idea. And I'm like, okay, you got these 3 things. Are you doing all 3 of them? And your provisional patent application only lasts a year. And in a year from now, we're going to say, hey, do you want to file the non-provisional? It's, this is one of the ways you stage in the US. You go from provisional, which is kind of an informal, less expensive process to get a patent application on file and hold your place, to the non-provisional, which is the more expensive, fully drafted application, and you only have a certain time frame in which to link those together. If you don't link them within that year, then you can't link them, right? And so we'll tell people, hey, you got a great idea. Here's your provisional patent application. It'll get you started, but you need to start validating your technology in your market. And in a year, we're gonna ask if you want to convert that into a full non-provisional. And I can't tell you how many times over the years we've said, hey, it's been 9 months, 12 months is coming up. Here's a process to file your non-provisional. What have you done to validate this? And they're like, Jeff, I just haven't had much time to do it. Okay, that's fair. That happens, right? That's 12 months moves really fast, especially when we're busy with other stuff and this is maybe a side project. You probably shouldn't, if you haven't spent the time to do the validation parts of this, you should consider not moving forward with the patent, because it's a lot of money and it's not going to buy you much value to just get a patent and spend the $20,000 on that over the next 2 years. You have to, in order to get your money back, you have to do these other steps. And they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. Let me think about it. And people are so married to their ideas. I can't tell you how many times people have come back and said, I've given a lot of thought and I want to do it. I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do it? Because you just told me you haven't had any time to validate your technology or your market. What's going to be different? And so it's kind of, we have to be careful. I have to be careful because I'm there to help them get done what they want. But sometimes they tell me to do things and incur costs on their behalf that I'm not sure is really in their best interest. We talk about it, but ultimately I'm their assistant in this process, if that makes sense. And I can give them my advice, but I help them do what they instruct me to do.
Yeah, it's not always easy, because you do become quite emotionally attached to that idea, particularly when you feel it's going to change the world. You become very emotional about the decision, and it's very important to have that independent accountability and independent validation to say, this is where you should go, or maybe you should pull back on this, or maybe it's time to let go. Yep. We're talking about validation here, or validation of the idea. But in doing that process, I think one of the things that we are also trying to understand is, has somebody already patented something similar or a matching concept? And what's the danger if we don't investigate that?
Yeah, I love that question, because the step in freedom to operate that I mentioned, right? Validate your technology, validate your market, but then secure the freedom to operate your business. Most people just think about getting a patent on their invention. They don't think about the other side of that coin, which is my product, if I make it, going to infringe somebody else's patents? Or is my brand, if I launch it, going to infringe somebody else's trademarks? Because they're related questions, but they're different. It's entirely possible to get a patent or a trademark on your product or your brand, and then have your product also infringe somebody else's patent, or your brand infringe somebody else's brand. It seems illogical or inconsistent. Like, why would the government grant a patent if your product is going to infringe somebody else's? Well, it's because you're building on technology that already exists, right? Every product out there is building on some type of technology that has come before it. So, as an example, somebody wants to create a new toy, but they want to use this super light material, a plastic of some sort. They're focused entirely on the toy itself and the shape of it and how a user maybe puts it together. But somebody might, and they might be able to get a patent on it because the shapes and how it's used is new. Nobody else has done that before. But that doesn't mean that you can just go out there and make it with a material that maybe some chemical company has already patented and owns. So there are ways that you have to think about what you're doing, what types of things you're building on, and how other people have probably protected those things. If you think about your phone, how many patents are in this, right? So many things out there have utility and design patents on them that it's easy to infringe somebody else's stuff. So that being said, when you're thinking about how do I protect my ability to operate my company from a legal perspective, that includes both questions. How do I protect my product or my design so nobody else can go out and make it? That's getting the patent, getting the trademark. And then how do I make sure that my product isn't infringing somebody else's patent or trademark? And that requires you to do an additional type of searching that, you're not the very first, we talked about stepping through, right? You're probably not going to do a lot of that non-infringement searching and analysis right up front. You're probably going to do the patent and trademark, filings initially, because that's how you start to, you say, okay, I just got to get a little security around what I think I'm going to build. Once you have that, you start doing validation. Then eventually you're going to do some more in-depth searching and say, okay, I'm really ready to launch this product. But before I launch it in the market, what's the effect? Are there other people's patents and trademarks I need to know about so that as I finalize my design, I can avoid or perhaps design around those IP assets that other people own?
Yeah. It's really important to do that. I've unfortunately seen a few business owners who have gone through that process, gone to launch, they've commercialized, they've got the marketing plan, they've hit go on the sales strategy, and then the very next day they've received an infringement notice.
Oh yeah, it happens all the time. We have, especially in the branding world, people say, I'm going to launch my company, I'm going to launch this brand, I got my own trademark, and maybe they did, but they launch and they've spent all this money on their website. They spent money perhaps on products with the packaging, with all the branding all over it. And, like you said, the day after they launch, somebody sees it and they say, well, you're infringing our trademark. And so this happens a lot when people kind of DIY their own IP, because you can file your own stuff. You can write your own patent application and file it. It probably won't be as high quality as if an attorney did it for you. You can file your own trademarks, but if you don't know what you're searching for to do that analysis, that non-infringement analysis, then you're probably not going to think of all the layers, and you're probably going to do something that's a little bit too abbreviated and miss some of the big items that would have been obvious to an attorney. So it happens all the time.
Yeah. That's unfortunate, but it's the reality. And you do need to take steps to, I guess, prevent that from happening to you. Jeff, look, you're in the US. I'm in Australia. Our listeners are all around the world. If I take out a patent in the US, am I protected for that same innovation in Europe, for example?
Oh, great question. We work with inventors kind of all over, right? But we work with inventors all over because they want to get protection in the US. And to your question, when you get protection in one country, that protection is limited to that country. So if we have an inventor out of the UK, let's say, who wants to get a product made in China and then sell it into the US and Australia, for example, and they come to us and they say, well, we want to protect this. We're going to have that conversation with them. Well, you're going to sell into the US. That's a major market for pretty much everybody. So you're probably going to want to get patent protection in the US. Let's start there. But you're going to make it in China. Your US patent will not protect you against other people making your exact same product in China. So you might want to consider getting a patent in China or wherever it is that you're going to manufacture your product. And then if you're going to sell into Australia, your US patent and your China patent aren't going to protect you against other people selling the same product into Australia. You have to have an Australian patent. And so you could, everywhere you go, you can actually link these patents together. And there are international treaties and agreements between countries to allow that to happen. But if you don't have actual filings and issued grants in each country, then ultimately you can only protect the things that you have protected in the countries where they're protected. And so sometimes that's enough. And there's, it gets expensive. Even I mentioned before that we used to do work with like IBM and Intel, and even those large countries who are, they're global, they're not going to go and try to file in every single country. It's just not practical or financially feasible, even for these really large companies. So when you talk about a small startup with a consumer product that they want to launch, sell into toys or kitchenware or whatever, you're probably not funded sufficiently to file 5 or 10 different patent applications in different countries. So you want to be really smart about where you choose to file. And the places to consider would be where are your largest markets, where are you manufacturing, where are you selling, and then where are your competitors doing those same activities. You might have, for example, you know, the same scenario, UK inventor selling into the US and Australia after manufacturing in China, but you might have a Japanese company who also makes and manufactures a product and sells that into the same places. So you might want to add Japan to your list in that case, where you say, okay, they make their own version, but we don't want them making our version. So maybe we'll get a patent in Japan so they can't do that. Anyway,
yeah.
but it's country specific, and that's the same for patents, trademarks. There's some overlap, and you know, there's some ways to stop people from importing things made in China into the US with a US patent, but you can't technically stop them from doing activities outside the US.
Right. So it seems quite complicated if you're not informed. And we mentioned right at the beginning that you're the engineer, attorney, MBA, entrepreneur. You've got all those skill sets. Most business owners, they're struggling to manage wearing all the hats they're currently wearing in their business. I always recommend that you don't try and do these on your own, that you actually engage the right people with the right expertise to help you. Now, Jeff, there's a term that's starting to become more common, and that's this whole idea of a fractional team. And I think that's a bit of the model that you've developed for how you deliver your service. And just explain briefly what are we actually talking about when we're talking about a fractional team?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I love that you use the phrase the right people at the right time, because that's what fractional is all about, right? Fractional. So this has come about maybe in the last 5 years. People love the word fractional, and everybody's now a fractional expert. But fractional really means that you're hiring somebody usually with a lot more expertise than you could hire them in a normal traditional setting. You couldn't hire them to, hire, I don't know, some really well-known programmer necessarily to be your full-time employee, because they might cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars that you don't have. But you might be able to hire them on a fractional basis, meaning, hey, maybe we're small. Maybe we just need their expertise for 5 hours a month or 10 hours a week or whatever it is, right? So you can essentially get them on a contract basis to be usually one of your executive team members on a time limited basis. But during that time that they're with you, you have access to their full expertise. So in our case, we actually do this on a team basis, because startups really need the right attorney with the right expertise at the right time. And most attorneys don't cover everything from employment to contracts to patents to fundraising. Like, you really need different people at the right time. And so our fractional legal team is all about having a small, really deliberate legal team that you can hire as a team, almost as if you had your own in-house legal team for your 3-man startup or your 30-man startup. But we're available usually on a retainer basis, right? So you might have, the way I like to think of it is, if you have the option to go out and hire an attorney to join your team, you get one person with one kind of capacity, one expertise. And for the same price, you can probably hire our team, and it's just at a retainer basis. And then you get access to 5 attorneys with different expertise and different availability. One attorney, I've been there. I've been the one attorney in a business before, and that one attorney is the bottleneck for everything legal. But if you have 5 attorneys with different expertise, you can put the right projects with the right attorney at the right time, and you lessen the bottleneck. You increase your access to experts, and you do it all on a budget that's maybe the same as what you would do to just hire one person. So that's, I don't know if I explained that really well, but that's fractional. Fractional is getting experts for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah. I think it's more than just getting them at a fraction of the price, but you're actually, the way you've described it is for a fraction of the price of what you would hire a full-time person, you're actually getting 5 times the skill set or more, perhaps. Which is like, it's like having the Swiss Army legal team in your pocket for the price of a single lawyer or a single attorney. So I think it's a perfect model for small, medium business owners who are trying to really grow their business, but also want to make sure they are protected legally. They understand their obligations. They've got the right tools and processes in place. So I think we'll see more and more adoption of that model by small, medium business owners, hopefully moving away from the idea that, no, I have to have my own full-time person, but actually looking at what's the best way that you can resource your business for growth. And I think this fractional model is really going to be something that we embrace going forward.
I believe so. Can I comment on that? Because
Oh, yeah.
I'm biased, but I believe this is how every law firm working with small companies should operate. If you're working with a big company, they want to hire the $2,000 an hour attorneys for their own reasons. Great, go do it, right? They have those budgets. Small companies don't, but they need a small startup has the same needs, just not as big, but they need all the same things. They have employees, they have ideas and innovation going on. They have contracts that they need reviewed, suppliers, like all the same things in a large corporation exist at a smaller scale. And so to not have the resources available at that small scale, it's just a huge obstacle. But the adoption is getting there. I had a client that we just onboarded. He literally signed his engagement letter today. We've been talking for the last 3 weeks. And he said, "Hey, Jeff, I talked to my network, and I want to look hire in a fractional legal team because I've already hired a fractional CFO. I hired a fractional CMO, and I'm like, why can't I do the same thing for my attorney? Like, I'm paying $1,000 an hour law firm to handle all these things, and they're great. Nothing wrong with the law firm, but why am I not using a fractional legal resource the same way I'm doing my marketing and my finance?" And I said, "Well, you've come to the right place. That's what we do." Right. And so we actually just got hired on today. We're starting projects and have settled everything, but it's just kind of the way that small startups and scaling companies should be operating. You said, you said it, you get 5 times the access, but you often get 5 to 10 times the expertise. When you hire one full-time person on a budget, you're like, well, I need somebody who's got 2 or 3 or 4 years of experience. When you hire a fractional person, you're hiring somebody who's gotten to the point in their career. I'm 25 years in. You can get somebody with 25 years of experience behind them. Still, they're not going to be in your space and on your team 40 hours a week necessarily, but you don't need them. The expertise is so vast that you can get to the heart of an issue much, much quicker than somebody who maybe has a couple years of experience, doesn't quite know where to go, has to do some research. So it's more access to more expertise for, the same or less cost often.
Yeah. Look, I think great solution, great discussion there about resourcing. So that's a bonus. We were talking about intellectual property. We've added in a great talk on resourcing your business with the right skills and expertise at the right price at the right time. Look, I'm excited by what we've heard today, and I know our listeners are as well. If you are in the stage of building something innovative, don't leave your intellectual property to chance. I think that's the crucial thing. Protect your intellectual property, but also make sure you don't infringe on somebody else. And look, whether you're a startup, a founder, or scaling a business at the moment, intellectual property needs to be part of your growth strategy. If you want to learn more about how you can implement this or even the fractional legal model, book in a free strategy call with Jeff. I think the place to go to book in that call is intellectualstrategies.com/strategy-call /start here, or just go to Intellectual Strategies, and I'm sure it'll be there very quickly on the front and center to tell you to book in.
It's right up front. It's right up front. But as an attorney, I always got to make things longer. So
look, take the time, check out, have a conversation with Jeff and find out how you can use that. Well, two gold nuggets there today, the fractional legal model, but also how you can protect your intellectual property as part of your growth strategy. Jeff, if there was one thing to leave our listeners with, one thing they must do to get started on this process, what would that be?
I'm going to be really generic here. My motto is innovate with confidence. And I think that, because I work with so many innovators who are filled with fear, maybe a lot of fear, maybe a little fear. And the one key to go from fear to confidence is just start taking actions. You don't need to take, like we talked about, you don't need to take that huge action. You just need to start taking a couple little actions. The action is the only thing that I know of that puts fear into the past, right? Action puts fear into the past, and we don't have any need to be afraid of the things that we've already tried, the things we've done. It's only the things that we think are ahead of us that we're afraid of. So action puts fear in the past, and every step towards action is a step towards being more confident in what you're doing.
Fantastic. Jeff Holman, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Business Behind Your Business podcast. Really appreciate the gold information you've shared with us today. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure, Paul. Thanks.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit, and send in your burning questions because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.